folks, welcome back to the channel. This episode is going to be a continuation of the How I Play Mandolin series here on YouTube and Patreon. In this video I'm going to be covering scales, so it's a little bit more in depth, a little bit longer video than I typically would post on YouTube, and an even longer video on Patreon. So if you want to support the video or support the channel, please like and subscribe here on YouTube and consider coming over to Patreon for a paid subscription. Other than that, appreciate you watching the video. Enjoy the video. We're going to be talking about major scales today, and not necessarily like one major scale. We're not going to go through and teach you the pattern of a major scale, but we are going to think about the parts of a major scale. Let's break a major scale into three parts: chord tones, color tones, and the four. Let's start with that last one first. The four is a very, very impactful note, meaning that it can influence the whole line that you're playing or even the chord that you're playing. Typically with music, music theory would say that the lowest note in the chord structure that you're playing is the root. So for example, if you play this open G chord that I think everybody learns at the beginning, you'll notice the G's in the bottom. Makes sense theory-wise. What happens when you play this D? Well, that's an A note. How does that work? Well, really, that is kind of an A6 with a raised fourth if you want to really make sense of what the chord is, but it works over D. If you were to take an A scale, that 4 is the D note. Once you add that 4 note to your lines, to your harmony, to any of those things, it's going to be very much we're moving to that chord. So if we're in the key of G, it would be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Learn your scales. But let's make them musical, right? Typically, they're going to be those three things, regardless of what scale it is. There's going to be some relative chord tones, meaning chord tones relative to the chord that is being played underneath them. They're going to be color tones that are adding to that. And then there's going to be a 4 that's a transitionary note. So understanding these three things will help us be so much more successful when we're playing. So that's just the easiest thing to think about. Just avoid the 4 unless you're moving, right? So if you're in the key of G, you may have heard this before. All of those notes are in the key of G. I never left the key of G. That's a B, a D, and an E, which is the 3, 5, and 6 of the key of G. And then I slide that D up to an E, so both of those are E, right? The only note I've changed is I've taken that B note up to a C note. That has changed that whole thing to the C chord, right? That's what happens when you add a 4 note to something. Even more so, that kind of takes us into the next topic, which is chord tones. What just happened there when I went from the B to the C? It was almost like a mini resolution. Like resolving means coming back to the 1, right? So if you play a chord change, when we get back to that 1, we've resolved. Well, when you go to the 4, it's kind of like a mini resolution, right? It's like, we're here. We're there. So what we want to start to think about is when we use the 4, how are we going to get there? Well, there's going to be two concepts that we want to think about right here, or two tools that we're going to use going forward. We've talked about arpeggios with open strings, and that's a really mandolin sounding thing, and I think that's a very valuable thing to learn, and that also got us started thinking about, hopefully, arpeggios and what they are. A root, third, fifth. But there's another couple of versions of an arpeggio that you can play. They're called inversions, right? Especially a 3-note arpeggio. And obviously when you expand that out with extended chords, all of these things just become more and more complex. But these basic chords, basic ideas we want to think about. What if we played that G major arpeggio from its 3rd? Right? What if we played it from its 5th? Right? Cool. Those are inversions, right? So if I'm having something, if I'm just starting off with a song and I'm trying to learn the most basic just non-melodic, like obviously you want to learn melodies, and you want to learn melodies how they're supposed to be played, right? But also sometimes what you want to also do is have your own voice. And how to create your own voice over a song that you know the chord changes of and you understand the melody, the first thing to do would be to outline the chords that are being played underneath you. If you're playing 9-pound hammer, that's a very acceptable break. Most people would play that, most people would do it, and it would be just fine. That is the first inversion of each chord's arpeggios. So for G, it's G, B, and D. For C, it's C, E, and G. And for D, it's D, F sharp, and A. Now, hopefully, you can start to kind of see, okay, well, the C and the G, they share a note. Well, if I do a G arpeggio from its root, and then I start C's arpeggio on G, back to G, and then I started D's arpeggio on its third, because then I could just flatten that. Let's do it again. What you've done now, what I just did, was voice lead arpeggios through chord changes. That is something that becomes very, very important the more you progress. Understanding that we can do different inversions of chords to get different voicings of chords, or even get closer, right? Because a D to a G is a long distance, but a G to an F sharp note is much closer, or a G to an A. As you see, there's not really a wrong option. You only have 2 other notes to choose from in an arpeggio. So there's not a lot either one will work. So what we really want to start looking at is, okay, cool. Can I do these arpeggios? Can I voice lead through chord changes? That's going to be the first thing you want to look at if you want to improvise, right? You can still learn melodies. You can still go learn melodies, and I suggest that you do that. But understanding and internalizing the chord changes and also voicing the chord changes is going to be something that is very impactful and helpful for you finding your own voice and performing in a way that you want to play. So now we've talked about inversions. Let's talk about color tones. With color tones, they're just going to be the other notes of the scale. So far we have the 4 and the arpeggio. Looking at a G scale. What are the other notes? That would be a 2, an A note, 6, an E note, a 7, F sharp note. Right? Well, where do they go? And I know if you've heard anything about music, if you've looked up music on YouTube at all, you've seen videos on pentatonic scales. What is a pentatonic scale? A pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale, and then typically they add 2 color tones to an arpeggio. So you have, right? Sorry, I added the root on top there, but that would be a root, 3rd, 5th, and if we added the 2 and the 6, and the root on top, you actually get a G run, which is typically what's played in bluegrass music at the end of a phrase. Sounds like a G run, right? So really music theory is just trying to describe the things you hear, right? The more we understand them though, and the more we understand their roles in the scale, we can understand how to voice lead, right? So if we take a pentatonic scale, we can know where in that scale, based on the chord tones, or am I going to transition to the next note by voice leading? So those are going to be like things to really hammer down as a beginner and really practice. It's super easy. You can build your own practice routines. It's not rocket science at that point. You want to play the root, third, and fifth, and you want to play them in different inversions of themselves, and how do they tie together, and you want to have that eureka moment. Also, once that gets boring and once that gets, you know, like you don't want to do it anymore, start adding color tones. Start adding the other notes of the scale of each of those chords. You'll find that some of those notes don't fit, but that's something that you want to kind of hunt after. You kind of see, why did those notes not fit? What is weird about this? What have I done here? For those explanations, come over to the Patreon. For my Patreon subscribers, this video is going to continue for you guys. We're going to talk about extensions. So thanks for watching, YouTube. See you at the next episode. Patreon, thanks for subscribing. What are extensions? I can't make you play more like yourself, but I can make you play like me. But that may not be what you want out of this. So the whole point is to give you the same tools that I have and help you make decisions that sound more like yourself. So I appreciate you watching the video. If you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe. Come over to the Patreon, support us over there. Otherwise, I will see you guys at the next video.